Good to have you with us on this Tuesday edition of Ed Schultz News and Commentary from the nation's capital. The president will speak to the country and the world tonight, a State of the Union address, his last one. And, of course, this is going to be very interesting to see how the president plays trade, as we've talked a great deal about. In an interview with Matt Lauer on NBC, the president talked all the way back to his theme of getting reelected in 2012, and that was how he stood with the automobile industry. Now, I get that. We all get that. But it's very clear the president is using this to sell the Trans-Pacific Partnership, like he is right there with the middle class all the way. And that you can trust him, and that this is a good deal. He's planting the seed in that regard. And I think there's a level of cynicism here in a big way. I'm an Obama fan, but we got to call it out as we see it. The Trans-Pacific Partnership will gut jobs in America. And now the president is going to use what he did in the past to make us believe that everything's going to be okay. Here it is.
7 years ago, the American auto industry was on the brink of collapse. Plants were closing. Hundreds of thousands of workers were getting laid off from jobs that had been their ticket to a middle-class life. And as the pain spread across the country, another 1 million Americans would have lost their jobs in the middle of the worst economic crisis of our lifetimes. Some said it was too late to turn things around, but I refused to turn my back on so many of the workers that I had met. Instead, I placed my bet on American workers.
And he is not doing that with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Now, that was the president's address over the weekend. You can't have it both ways. A bad deal is a bad deal. Outsourcing is outsourcing. And it was a financial collapse of the automobile industry that nobody wanted to have any kind of government money prop up an industry in this country, and the president clearly made the right call on that. He is making the wrong call on this, and tonight he is going to be selling the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Issue number 2, what about Donald Trump? Lauer asked the president if he is responsible for the rise of Trump.
Do you take responsibility for that? And the reason I ask it is, people said after 8 years of George W. Bush in the White House, the American people were hungry for your message of hope and change. So after 7 years of the Obama presidency, do you feel you're responsible for a certain hunger out there for the message that Donald Trump is putting out?
Well, hold it right there. That's a great question. Hold it right there. That's a great question. But that question should be posed not about Donald Trump, but about Bernie Sanders. It is very clear that Bernie Sanders has tapped into something across this country. Number one, he's genuine. And number two, he's making people realize, you know what, this income inequality gap is really real. Vice President Joe Biden acknowledged that.
I think that Bernie is speaking to a yearning that is deep and real, and he has credibility on it. And that is the absolute enormous concentration of wealth in a small group of people, with the middle class now being able to be shown being left out or
but
stagnant.
Hillary's talking about that as well.
It's relatively new for Hillary to talk about that. Hillary's focus has been on other things up to now, and that's been Bernie's. No one questions Bernie's authenticity on those issues.
And they question hers, you think?
Well, I think they question everybody's who hasn't been talking about it all along. But I think she's come forward with some really, really thoughtful approaches to deal with the issue.
Here's the news. This morning, MoveOn.org is endorsing Bernie Sanders. MoveOn.org in the past has never endorsed unless 67%, 66 2/3% of their members go with a candidate. There was recently a survey done over a number of weeks. 350,000 people connected to MoveOn.org. 78% want Bernie Sanders. Now, that's not favoring one candidate over another. That's an absolute story to report. Only 14% of Move On went along with Hillary Clinton, and almost nobody in the organization, less than 1%, went with Martin O'Malley. So what Biden is talking about is the crux of the entire movement behind Sanders. And this is a classic. We've never seen anything like this in the Democratic Party for a long time. Two so closely put together. Back in the Obama-Clinton race, it was pretty clear who had the best ground game. Hillary Clinton clearly has shorn up any kind of problems that she had in a ground game, and it's going to be a knockdown drag-out in Iowa. It is really, you could talk about all the polling you want. It is way too close to call. Now, the president hasn't weighed in on any of this, and I'm sure he's not going to weigh in on any of that tonight in the State of the Union address. But I do think that the president's going to look back on where he was 7 years ago, where he is today, where the country is, 5% unemployment. I remember when it was double-digit, and most people were thinking we'd never get to below double-digit unemployment. There's been a lot of good things that have happened in our economy, but it's the wage disparity and it's the outsourcing that has really brought a lot of American families to struggle, and this constant fight over health care. Now, I'm in the process of changing jobs, which is changing our health care. And, you know, when you cover health care and you talk about health care in this business, you wonder if it's ever going to get personal. I think you know the struggle that my family's had. My wife is on the mend in a big, big way with cancer. We're in our third year battling that, and we're winning. Now, she's well over the $1 million mark when it comes to expenses in fighting this disease. Obamacare is trying to be repealed by the Republicans. The president vetoed it. Let's just say the president signed it, and there was no more health care bill, that the Affordable Care Act would be gone. That means me changing jobs, my wife would lose her insurance. Just the simple portability of it, the simple of being rejected because you've got a pre-existing condition. This is real life stuff. And I hope the president talks about the accomplishments of the health care bill that was passed and where we need to go from here. Because this is going to bubble up on the campaign trail as we get closer. There's a real division between Republicans and Democrats on what we're going to do with health care in this country. For more on this, and a member of the House Budget Committee, let's go to Congressman Tim Ryan. Congressman, good to have you with us.
Good to be with you, Ed.
What a game last night, huh?
Oh,
holy smokes. Was that one of the all-time best you've ever seen?
That was an unbelievable. I tell you, love or hate Coach Saban, the guy got guts. I mean, that's why he wins the big games. He knows that he makes that call on the onside kick and perfectly executed. They've probably been practicing it all year, especially
the kickoff return, the special teams.
Yeah.
How do you not watch that game and walk away unbelievably impressed with that quarterback from Clemson? Who is that kid? I mean, you know, he's from the ACC. Clemson has a great year and everything else, but when you sit and watch him for a full game and not a highlight reel, I mean, it's just play after play.
Yeah, he moves around. He breaks your back. The 1 3rd down, he goes from all the way to the right side of the field all the way back around for the first down. I mean, you just drive defenses crazy.
Yeah.
Reminded me of Big Eddie Schultz back in his day.
No, they used to get the sundial out to time me into 40.
You were a pocket passer.
That's right. When I set up, they knew where I was going to be. All right, Congressman, what are we going to hear out of the president tonight? What are the expectations? And I mean, how lofty can he get when he knows he's in his last year and he's dealing with a Congress that has said no to everything he's wanted to do?
Well, I think it's interesting from what I was reading in the papers this morning and a little bit on the talk shows this weekend. He's going to try to kind of recap, I think, some of the accomplishments, which I think is a pretty good idea because he will be limited moving forward in the next year with exactly what he can do working with Congress. And so I think a reminder of the things you were just talking about, you know, with you and your wife and portability and pre-existing conditions and all of that. I think just a reminder of how important that is. And if there's a few glitches, let's fix them and keep moving forward. And then also it sounds like, you know, something that's going to be grounded in trying to unify the country again. And he has been, love him or hate him, he's been a polarizing figure in the last few years. Part of that's media-driven, but part of it is just, you know, how things have unfolded since the crisis in 2008, 9, 10, the collapse of the economy and all the rest. So trying to bring people back together because really when you look at it, when you talk about the kind of healthcare issues that you were talking about, and really at the end of the day, the quote-unquote Obamacare was really the Republican alternative back in the day to the Clinton plan. So realistically, we should all be looking at this as a middle-of-the-road kind of thing. I wanted single-payer. You wanted single-payer. We wanted a public option. We didn't get that stuff, but we have what should be perceived as a middle-of-the-road. Infrastructure, That should be seen as a middle-of-the-road American unifying issue, rebuilding our country, wiring our schools, making sure every kid has access to the technology available. You look at research and development, whether it's the National Science Foundation or the kind of cancer research that needs to happen, or Alzheimer's. These are things that are middle of the road. So I think he's going to try to bring everybody together and say, hey, guys, there's a lot more we agree on than disagree on. Let's have our fights. We all kind of enjoy it, but at the end of the day, we've got to do the work of the American people, and we should agree on a lot of this stuff.
Congressman, does Syria deserve a place in tonight's State of the Union address? And what's unfolding in the Middle East and relations with big players? We're at a boiling point in many regards. And, of course, the Republicans are going to be chopping at the bit. They totally disagree with everything the president's done in this regard. Where does he go on foreign policy tonight?
I think he's going to be very careful. I think he's going to have to comment on it, and he's going to have to make people continue to make people aware of how complicated and complex the problems are when you're dealing with these lone wolf attacks, and when you're dealing with a global jihad that can just be inspired, and these, as I said, lone wolfers acting, wherever they are in America or across the country. The issue with the refugees and the active attempts to try to sneak, radical terrorists into these refugee programs and slide them into these different countries. How complicated this is to be both compassionate and safe, and then to try to solve the problem. But I think he does have to be careful because both Democrats and Republicans have disagreed with how he's handled the Syria issue really from the very, very beginning. And so he's got to be careful on how much he gets into it. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, too, we've got to start preparing for what's happening in China right now. It's already having a ripple effect into South America and Central America because of all the commodities that were supplied to China over the last few years, when even in a bad year they're growing at 7 or 8%, not to mention the 12, 14, 15% growth they were having for a while. China's in a free fall right now. Their banking system is dark. Their financial system is dark. We don't really know what's going on. Their military budget is dark. So I think he's got to address that big elephant in the middle of the room, too. So as you can see, his plate's going to be full to try to address all these big challenges we're facing.
Yet the president says we have to do the Trans-Pacific Partnership or China will write the rules. China can't even write their own currency right now.
Well, that's taken a lot of the air out of the balloon of that argument, I will tell you right now. And when you look closely at this TPP, whether it's subverting local, state, national laws, like with the country of origin labeling or smoking laws, smoking bans that we have, food safety, TPP is written, basically to undercut local consumer protection laws. Mm-hmm. Just one example. Not to mention what's going on in Vietnam with labor unions and the inability to unionize in some of these countries. And then you come back and you look, which is very telling. You see what's happening with the Supreme Court, very close to gutting the public union's ability to be active politically. And that's going to be a major, major blow to the unions, public sector unions, as well as Democrats. And continue to tilt the scale towards the big super PACs, the Koch brothers, and the Republican establishment money.
Congressman Tim Ryan, good to have you with us. All the best, my friend. We'll do it again.
Take care, big guy.
All right, buddy. Thanks. This is Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team bring you this production. When we come back, Virg Bernero, he'll tell you how to run an American city and also what we need. Larry Cohen, former president of CWA, joins us. He's been on the ground in Iowa. What does he see? His reaction to some of the things that are unfolding. And this is a very interesting soundbite from Hillary Clinton, cut 7 on the big list, yesterday in Iowa, talking about health care. Listen to this.
He would take it all together and send health insurance to the states.
Is that true? Would Bernie Sanders send health care to the states? We'll ask Larry Cohen. Stay with us. We're right back. Hey, folks, you've heard me talk about BioGreen Clean. I'm going to show you right now on my airplane just how tough this is. I want you to keep in mind, chemical-free, 100% plant-derived, biodegradable. It is the safest cleaner that you can get, and it's the most effective. Go to our website, wegoted.com, or go to biogreenclean.com. www.BIOGREENCLEAN and order today. It's time to continue our conversation about mechanical insulation. Mechanical insulation is for the piping systems in our nation's commercial and industrial facilities. Facility owners are burning up billions of dollars through the lack of mechanical insulation on these piping systems. Call the iSave team. Insulation saves America valuable energy, and this team of energy conservation specialists is shovel-ready to save you money. Visit iSaveTeam.org to have a specialist give your plant an energy audit.
We perpetuate a culture of crime all the way from Wall Street right down to the main street in our hometowns. It's worse than it has been since FDR took control of the problem and said we can't count on industry taking care of the American labor. They probably have already engaged into some type of criminal cover-up, and the law prohibits the government from even doing anything about it.
Catch America's lawyer Mike Papantonio on YouTube at youtube.com/GoLeftTV.
Well, the president tonight is going to be talking about what has happened over the last 7 years. I'm going to be anxious to see exactly where he wants to take this year, because it's going to be another year of obstruction. He's going to hit trade awful hard. There's no doubt about that. But if you want to get on automatic pilot for 3 minutes and ask someone how to run an American city, where were we 7 years ago, where are we today, I would turn to no one other than Virg Bernero, who is the mayor of Lansing, Michigan. Virg, good to have you back with us.
Good morning, Ed. Great to hear from you.
You bet, my friend. How you been?
Good. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Well,
where were we 7 years ago? Where are we now? Where do we have to go? Your take.
Boy, I shudder to think where we were, Ed, but you and I mean, we were in it together fighting for the American dream and for American manufacturing. And as tough as it is for a lot of people out there, and we know a lot of people are still hurting, unemployed and underemployed, but by God, it would have been so much worse if the auto industry had been allowed to collapse, as many people on the right wanted it to happen. But thank God, President Obama invested, believed in the American worker like we believe in the American worker. There's no more productive worker in the world than the American worker. He and she just need to be properly supported. Other countries support their workers. Other nations, other governments support their workers. They're not shy about it. In the United States, less so. But thank God that President Obama invested in the auto industry, and look at it today. For the third time in less than 10 years, we have the Motor Trend Car of the Year coming out of Lansing, Michigan. The Chevy Camaro, of course, we make the Cadillac CTS, the Buick Enclave, a bunch of crossovers, Cadillac ATS, but now the Camaro came. I remember just a couple years ago, GM announced they were bringing the Camaro from Canada over to Lansing, and now already it's an award winner, this iconic sports car being made right here in downtown Lansing. We have some of the greatest workers, I think the greatest workers in the world. We just have to invest in them, believe in them, and that's what GM has done. GM has invested over $1 billion since that time, since the scare, since the collapse, since the bankruptcy, the reorganization. They've added all sorts of jobs. They just added a third shift, 500 jobs, and the Motor Trend Car of the Year for 2016. So it's going to be a great year in Lansing and in the country. Here we were on the precipice of doom, of disaster, of a depression if the auto industry had been allowed to fall by the wayside. As you know, there's such a supply chain with it, the entire manufacturing supply chain. You think about all the things that go into a car, the tires, the glass, the parts, etc. All that manufacturing could have been lost.
And this is what China wants to do. They want to undercut all of that and dump their product on our market, and that's what we got to look out for.
Well, as they have, as they have with so many other industries. I mean, we're the only country in the world, I think, other than, I guess, Britain, that sort of gives the industry away. I mean, nobody gives stuff away like the USA. It's unbelievable. Other nations stand up and fight. I mean, that's what we need to do. We need to not be shy about it. The only one pushing for things like the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, is the finance, so-called industry, Wall Street. There's only 3 ways to create wealth. You get this, Ed, completely. There's only 3 ways to create wealth. You make it, you mine it, or you grow it. Period. You make it, you mine it, or you grow it. Finance is not an industry. Finance is there to support the other stuff. You got to make things. Great nations have to produce greatly. What's led the turnaround in Michigan has been auto production. We put the P in GDP, gross domestic production, gross domestic product. That's what you got to have. You got to have product, and that's what made this country great. That's what created the middle class in this country was product. And this notion that Wall Street has tried to push with Madison Avenue that we can spend our way out. You've got presidents on both sides of the aisle saying, keep spending. Keep spending. You've got the government under Democrat and Republican issuing checks to people. It's incredible. And I'm not talking about welfare check. I'm talking about those reimbursement checks. Remember that a few years ago, Ed? What was that about? I mean, how can the government give you checks when there's to every citizen, every taxpayer, when there's a deficit? It's incredible. We should have been investing that in industry like other countries do. Other countries support their workers. That's what we need to do. We have the greatest workers in the world. We need fair trade, not free trade. When you hear the word free trade, just remember, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Somebody pays for free trade, and it's the American worker. We've lost millions of jobs since China was let into the to the free trade in 2001. And again, that was under both Republican and Democratic presidents. That was under both Bush and Clinton. We've made mistakes, but let's learn from our mistakes. I don't see how this TPP is going to improve things. The bottom line is, show me what it's going to do for the American worker. If it's not going to help the American worker, I'm against it. It's a very simple decision rule.
Virg Bernero, always great to get 5 minutes of Virg and where America is. Our audience is always jacked to hear you and the way you view things and the way you tell it like it is and get after it. I hope life is good for you, my friend. We'll do it again.
Thanks so much. We missed. Have a great year. Good to hear from you.
You
Take
bet.
care,
Virg Bernero, mayor of Lansing, Michigan. When we come back, what's on the ground in Iowa? How do you judge what's going to happen on February 1st based on what the infrastructure is? Stay with us. We're right back.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania, to the auto factories of Michigan, to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
Secretary Clinton and her campaign now know that she is in serious trouble. Suddenly, Bernie Sanders is no longer a nice guy, and he's wrong on this, and he's wrong on that, and he's wrong on that. That is not surprising when you have a Clinton campaign that is now in trouble and now understands that they can lose.
What does in trouble mean? I think it's pretty fair to say that progressives in this country had no idea that this was going to be the kind of battle it is right now. I had no idea that Bernie Sanders wants to take health care and put it back to the states. And this surprised me when this unfolded on the campaign trail in Iowa on Monday. Listen to this.
And he would take it all together and send health insurance to the states, turning over yours and my health insurance to governors like Terry Branstad.
Now the question, is that true? I always thought that Bernie Sanders was a universal health care advocate, has been his whole career. Turning it over to the states, in what form and fashion? For more on this, let's go to Larry Cohen, former president of Communication Workers and a surrogate for the Sanders campaign. This is news here, if this is the truth. Mr. Cohen, good to have you with us. Straighten us out on this. What about that?
Not true at all. Medicare for all, it guarantees everybody the same Medicare that people over 65 have now. There's no basis for that. It does show, as Bernie said, total desperation.
What's on the ground in Iowa? I understand that MoveOn.org this morning has come out and endorsed Sanders. What's the mechanism of that?
Well, it was amazing. So MoveOn.org had a vote among their members. Over 350,000 voted, and it was a landslide for Bernie. He got almost 80%. So again, what we see is that every time members vote in a Democratic online election, whether it's the communication workers vote that ended on December 17th, whether it's National Nurses United that was last summer, whether it's MoveOn.org, whether it's Democracy for America, which was founded by Howard Dean. He himself endorses Clinton. Every one of the Working Families Party, every one of these votes has been overwhelmingly for Bernie Sanders. There's an enthusiasm in this country, and I saw it last week in Iowa, that I think is underestimated.
This is the most recent presidential forum, the Fusion Presidential Forum. Here's what Sanders said.
Have you noticed lately that she's been getting more aggressive with you?
Yes!
Why is that?
I don't know. It could be.
You tell me.
It could be that the inevitable candidate for the Democratic nomination may not be so inevitable today.
And Sanders went on to say this.
If the Democrats want to nominate a candidate who, in fact, is electable to become president of the United States, is going to, in fact, defeat the kind of right-wing Republicans that are out there, I think it is becoming increasingly apparent that Bernie Sanders is that candidate.
And the Clinton response?
Do you have concern about where you are 3 weeks out from the caucuses?
I really don't, because I always expected it would close. I never, I don't really pay attention to polls because, there's just no guarantee. We know that the circumstances of polling, the kinds of polling that is done, the difficulty that people have had in polling races. Most pollsters have had problems in the last couple of go-arounds, and so I'm focused on what we're doing on the ground. I just feel good about where we are, but it's unpredictable, and we'll have to wait and see how it turns out when the folks are actually in the room.
When they're in the room, and how many people are going to be in the room. Hillary Clinton admitting that the polling is not as scientific as it could be. What do you make of this? This is a different sounding candidate and a different scenario that seems to be playing out, one that really wasn't anticipated by a lot of Democrats and progressives.
Yeah, I think she's trying to square up with what the realities are in Iowa. That's why you have fairly desperate comments saying that Bernie Sanders would turn over health care to Governor Branstad, who's despised by progressives in Iowa. And I think she's right about that. I think she's going to lose in Iowa, and she's going to lose in New Hampshire. And
now, this unfolded yesterday. Has the Sanders campaign responded to that, to your knowledge?
No, not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge. But I think Bernie will respond to that, and quite loudly, saying that this is a voice of desperation, and it's totally untrue, and she should retract it.
Well, let's talk about the operation. She clearly did not have the operation in 2008 and was blindsided by the ground game of Obama. Certainly couldn't make the same mistake twice. I mean, they are strong on the ground. But how do you determine how this is going to play out? I mean, you need a special kind of supporter to show up to do this kind of stuff, don't you?
Absolutely. It's at least an hour, and that would be in rural Iowa. You have to show up about 6:30. It starts at 7 Central Time. In many cases, it's going to be 2 hours. Or even longer. So you need somebody who, on a cold Monday night, February 1, and it has been cold in Iowa, will make that commitment. And what our campaign has done is ask people to sign, a caucus pledge. And then, we've trained thousands of precinct captains and built a whole structure from the ground. So, I'm confident we're going to do well on February 1.
All right, let's talk about promises. The story that's unfolding is that this new labels organization that started in 2010 wants a promise from presidential candidates that are going to promise to address 4 areas. That's job creation, the federal budget, and a couple other things. I think it's hogwash. There's such a political divide in Washington. I think it would be a cave by progressives if they were to get involved in this. Clinton has not signed on to it. Neither has Bernie Sanders. Martin O'Malley has. My take on that is he needs press anywhere he can get it. What do you make of this no labels? There are a number of Republicans that have signed on to it, 5 other of the candidates. Joe Lieberman and John Huntsman are heading this thing up. Does this have any bearing as you see it at all, Mr. Cohen?
Not much. Having looked at their website and, read the material, I think that it's based on a fantasy that if people sit down, they can work things out, despite the structural obstacles like Social Security.
Well, that's one of the things is the entitlements. They want to promise that they will address entitlements. Well, let me tell you how the Republicans address entitlements. It's cut, and then privatize everything you can. So where's the progressive movement? Where's the compromise on dealing with somebody like that? I mean, it's unrealistic to ask a Democrat, where the American people and the vast majority of them like Social Security, like Medicare and Medicaid, it's working, and these ideologues come along and say, well, it's the federal budget, we can't afford it anymore. What do you mean we can't afford it? We got defense money galore. We're protecting the country, yet we don't want to live up to the commitments that people have paid into for over 7 decades, and it's another Wall Street attempt to make more money, so to privatize the money that's coming in. I mean, how else do you read it? How do you compromise with people with that kind of vision?
Well, not only can't you compromise, we shouldn't compromise. We're not going to privatize part of Social Security benefits. That was a Bush proposal. We're not going to cut the inflation protection in Social Security. Even the Clinton campaign, is willing to talk about those kinds of cuts. They call it chain CPI, meaning chain consumer price index, which is just a way to, lower the increases year to year with inflation. So, with the Republicans in the room who want to do all those things and more, what do you compromise? I mean, Bernie's position on Social Security is to eliminate the cap on on paying into Social Security for people who make over $250,000 and more, and to deal with the problem that way, and then to look for ways to actually increase the benefit. We pay less as a percentage of income replacement than any other democracy in the world. So, that's Bernie wants to increase it, not cut the benefits. How do you compromise with people who want to cut?
You can't. You're going to tell me that Ryan, the Speaker of the House, is going to be a heck of a lot easier to deal with on possibly shutting down the government than Boehner was? He's pushed by ideologues as well. Larry Cohen, former president, Communication Workers of America, surrogate for the Sanders campaign. Thanks so much, Larry. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
This is Ed Schultz News and Commentary, brought to you by Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team. We'll have on our website and in a future production an interview with former Senator Joe Lieberman about the No Labels organization and what their expectations are of presidential candidates to give promises. We're back tomorrow.